have the pleasure of welcoming our great guest, Sir Chris Cassidy, current member of NASA. So, Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh man, what a big open-ended question. Good to talk to you, by the way. Hello.
You too. Thank
And
you.
I'm not wearing my Packers outfit. I thought I'd opt for the NASA stuff. So,
You look great.
yeah, I'm just a normal kid. I grew up in Maine, and then went to the Naval Academy. From there, went into the SEAL teams. 10 fantastic years in the SEAL teams, and then applied and became an astronaut in 2004. And I've been here now for 10 years as well. That's the quick 20-second wrap up of my 20-year professional life. But there's whatever you want to talk about. I'm happy to dive into any of those details. But that's me in a nutshell.
Well, yeah, that's just you in a nutshell. Just a quick 10 years with the most elite fighting force on the planet, and then stepping right into to NASA. You've been up in space multiple times, had multiple spacewalks outside. I know that we'll try to get into all of that. But I think first of all, I just want to know where do you go from here? I mean, you're only 44 years old, and you were a 10-year SEAL. You've been an astronaut for 10 years. What is next?
You know, it's a good question. I'm often asked that, and lately I've been thinking about it more, about like a real answer. And there's some stuff that I've always thought would be cool, like to hike the Pacific Crest Trail or the Appalachian Trail, or to kayak along the intercoastal waterway there, or some kind of really cool adventurous thing, sail around the world or something. That sounds really fun to me. Just, a total departure from government service, and just do something adventurous like that. That's one thing, but that doesn't, as you know, that doesn't put food on your table. That's just all about myself. So that's a good question. Part of me would want to use all the experience that I've gained throughout and transition into maybe working in the space industry in some way, independent from NASA. There's all these commercial companies popping up that are providing space services, basically taking cargo to the space station now, but soon we'll be taking people. So maybe something like that, but also, when I was a kid, I liked to referee basketball and football games. So maybe I'd go, it's March Madness right now. It makes me think about being an NCAA basketball ref. Who knows?
What about I'm sure people ask you, what about running for office, man? Are you kidding me? You talk about a resume for a president of the United States. What about that?
I don't know about president, but my home state is Maine. I've thought about going back to Maine in some way, or maybe being governor or running for governor or something like that. But you know what? I'm not so sure politics is something I want to dive into, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, I can imagine you don't want to deal with all the red tape and stuff you have to go through to get into it. But when you talk about a guy that someone would vote for, all you got to do is just flash them your resume a few times. I know you're a humble guy, but to think of all the stuff that you've already accomplished at 44, I mean, I know you've been awarded 2 Bronze Stars, is that right?
Yeah.
And multiple other things from NASA and from the military that it's almost too much to list, all the things that you've accomplished already, and you're still so young. It's crazy to me. When did you? So you became a SEAL. You entered you passed BUDS when? How old were you?
Yeah. So I went to the Naval Academy, and then when you're at the Naval Academy, or when you have to pick what you're going to do in the Navy, and it's probably obvious to some, but some people don't realize there's lots of things you can do in the Navy. You can be a pilot, you can be a surface ship guy, you can be a submarine driver, you can be in the SEAL teams, you can be an EOD, which is explosive ordnance disposal, many, many different avenues. And then I met these really, really motivating guys when I was probably a sophomore, I think, in college, and they were SEAL teams. There's always a couple SEAL representatives there at the Naval Academy that sort of mentor and do exactly what they did for me, really inspire the guys and get you to try out. And so in meeting those guys is really what turned me on. And I was I guess 21 years old, and then completed all the prerequisites while I was in college, and was lucky enough to get selected. There's 1,000 people in the Naval Academy class, and there's only a small subset. In my year, there was 16 of us that could pick SEALs. Not everybody in the 1,000 wanted to or was medically qualified, so it narrows the pool down a little bit. But still, just 16 spots. So I was pretty fortunate to get one of those. Pretty happy. So it was when I was 23 years old when I reported to SEAL training in what would that be? It was the summer of 1993, and then a year later, I popped out the other end of the process because BUDS is part of that, and then there's a couple other smaller schools, and then a more advanced training kind of a thing. Basically, BUDS teaches you how to block and tackle, and then you got to go to the advanced training to figure out how to put the plays and and do the X's and O's kind of stuff.
Did you have any? So you said you went to the Naval Academy. Did you have any idea going in that you wanted to become a SEAL, or was it those guys that you said you met that kind of drove you towards that?
Yeah, I was just a young, naive 18-year-old dude coming out of high school, and nobody in my family had really been in the military. My dad had served just a couple of years in Vietnam era, but not any extended military service or somebody that I could really ask, what is it? What am I really getting myself into? So I naively showed up I went for 1 year to the Naval Academy prep school in Newport, Rhode Island before I went to Annapolis. And I showed up there just kind of thinking, hey, I'm going to go be in the Navy, whatever that means. It's going to happen. Let's see what happens. And then it was through the course of a year or so that I matured a little bit and realized all the different things that I just told you about. And so when I was in high school, no clue that I would be in the SEAL teams.
Yeah, I can imagine. I would think that might be a good thing that you didn't know what was coming on the other end, because I've talked to other guys that were SEALs, and I've actually referenced it here on the podcast that they said, a couple of guys I've talked to said, if I would have known what it was like and what the training was like, there's probably no way in hell I would have gone into that. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I don't know. It to some degree, yeah, and it was also a different time. This was like when I was in high school, like 25, 26 years ago, and there was long before all these movies and books and stuff about the SEAL teams, and 24-hour news cycle didn't exist back then. And so nobody knew about the SEAL teams, let alone somebody who was trying to go in. I mean, it was just so not secretive kind of, or just sort of hush-hush, unspoken. And even when I first got in the SEAL teams in the early 90s, I knew that there was this thing called SEAL Team 6. I was a member of the SEAL community and didn't really even know who the guys were or what they did down the road at that team. And now you can't read a book without reading about SEAL Team 6.
So what SEAL team were you a part of?
Well, when I very first graduated, right out of BUDS, I asked for SEAL Delivery Vehicle Team 2, which is in Norfolk, and that's underwater vehicles, mini subs, and I love diving, and the thought of diving off of a full-size submarine, driving this little mini sub off the back garage of a full-size submarine and then going off hours and hours into some mission sounded really, really cool to me. I mean, some people don't like the water that much, and even amongst SEALs, there's some of us that go, some people that tell me, you volunteered for SDV team? You want to be underwater that much? But I thought it was really cool. So I spent 4 years there, and that'd be a cool thing to reference, maybe put on the podcast. Maybe you could show a picture, just do a Google search for SEAL Delivery Vehicle and a little flooded submersible, really, really cool. So I did 4 years there, and then went to graduate school up in Boston at MIT for a couple of years, and then moved out to Coronado and was at SEAL Team 3. And that's when the whole September 11th thing happened. That's a whole other story. But so SEAL Team 3 throughout that early part of the war, and then came back from that deployment overseas in Afghanistan and moved back to Virginia, where I went to Special Boat Team 20, and then to SEAL Team 10. While I was at SEAL Team 10 is when my application was pending to become an astronaut, and I came here in 2004. So those are the differences. Basically, East Coast, West Coast, back and forth a little bit, mix of all the different teams that we have in the Navy, in SEAL teams.
So you were part of this SEAL delivery vehicle? Is that what you called it?
Yeah, sealed delivery vehicle, or SDV.
Okay. Yeah. So Todd's my technical guy. Todd's gonna get on that. Make sure he gets that Google search and puts one up. Hopefully, like right here on my right shoulder. If he's real good at this, we'll see how it goes.
Yep. Right there.
Right there. You think? Yeah. Right.
Right opposite. Or you could put it opposite the station on my
yeah. No pressure, Todd. He only has the International Space Station
Yep.
right here over his right shoulder. Can I get just a grainy Google image search, please, of a SEAL delivery vehicle? That'd be nice, Todd, when you watch this. Either way, so when you say that, I know I've seen it on movies and stuff, probably just like everybody else listening. You say you drive off the back out of a garage of a submarine in a smaller submarine, basically, and go execute a mission. Can you take us through that a little bit of how that goes? And I'm sure there's a pressure lock, and then they flood the room, and then they eventually open up the garage, and then boom, it's you in just a black ocean. Can you take us through that?
Yeah, you summed it up, but that's exactly what it is. So inside a regular submarine, you're just wearing clothes like you and I are wearing right now. It's normal atmosphere. You're breathing regular air. It's not flooded or anything. There's usually always 2 hatches between the outside water and those people. So we take this thing called the dry deck shelter. Again, everything's got an acronym, so that's DDS. And that bolts onto the back of not all submarines, just a few that are configured to receive this dry deck shelter. And that has a large compartment, a hangar basically. You can think of that as a garage. In that garage is parked the mini sub. And then there's a safety compartment for diver emergencies, and then a transfer trunk in the middle. And that transfer trunk is what you can access into and out of the submarine from. So once the submarine's underway, flooded, we're cruising along under the water, nothing showing up out of the surface, and then we'll put all the divers ourselves up into this compartment, close the hatch to the sub, open a big valve, and equalize it. And it's actually pretty complicated for the submarine guys because they're very sensitive to ballast. And when all of a sudden you open a big valve and take on 60,000 pounds of water, they're having to pump out, they're having to move water on other tanks so that they can keep a nice, steady, plane through the water. Because if they don't, the risk to us as divers is an excursion to deep depth or broaching the surface, and then guys fall all over the place or go too deep and too fast, so you get decompression issues and all this kind of thing. So it's pretty delicate balance of water management on the sub side. And then outside on the deck, once we open this big door, this big hydraulic door, about the size of, I don't know, a Ford F-150 maybe, big door. And the sub's still going about a knot or a knot and a half. So if a swimmer with fins on can swim about 1 knot. So if you fell off the sub, you're busting out to keep up with the sub or to grab on. So you don't want to kind of let go. And then we just back the mini sub out, get into that slipstream. We have a little carabiner on a rope and disconnect, and off we go into the blackness of the ocean and go do our mission. And then 8 hours, however many hours later, we'll come back. The submarine is supposed to be at this point at midnight, say, or 2 in the morning, and then we come back and get to that same point and catch up to it and reverse that process and come back in. It was pretty cool. Even with having done spacewalks are my favorite thing I've ever done, but driving those mini subs is really a close second.
It's crazy to think about what you just went through. So let's say the first time you went through that, where you say you boarded a sub, you're hanging out with your guy, with your SEAL team, and you're seeing. Are you guys segregated from the other guys in your own little quarters, the SEALs?
On the sub you're talking about?
Yeah.
No, the subs are pretty small. There's only one one mess deck area, one common berthing, so everybody's kind of mixed in together and putting their gear on, kind of like in the away team locker room. I envision an away team locker room is pretty small, and you don't have the big, huge cubby hole that you have when you're at your home court, So
yeah, so when those guys see you come on, though, let's say just a guy Just the guy that's not a SEAL, it's on the sub, and they see you guys come on. We're like, oh great, here we go. What do we got to do with these guys again?
I think who says that are the cooks, because we'll bring 30 guys on of a crew of 120 and eat almost as much as the rest of the crew does.
Okay, was that first time you boarded that and you did the whole decompression and you drove the sub out of the big sub? Was that how'd you feel? Was that a scary moment for you?
Well, it's you kind of do crawl, walk, run. We would go to a nice, clean water area, like off of Key West. There's some good areas where submarines work. Or back early in my career, it was off of Puerto Rico. We don't have the base there in Roosevelt Roads anymore, Puerto Rico, but that's where we would go. And we would do it in the daytime first, so you could see, your visibility was you could see a long ways. And we just do basic stuff at the very beginning, like disconnect the sub, stay within line of sight of where you left, and then drive straight back in, and do that back and forth a couple times, and then do a bigger loop, and just kind of getting a feel for it. So the first couple times I did it, it felt very controlled. It's not instant. It's like preseason football. I would imagine you're not executing plays like you would in mid-season right away. So then we progress into doing it at night, and then up the ante a little bit and do some more full practice missions before we would ever certify a platoon of guys as being ready to go. You know what I mean?
Yeah. How many guys do you fit in the mini sub inside the large one?
Inside the mini sub itself, it's got a pilot and a navigator, and you can fit a couple guys in the back with some cargo. But the actual drivers of it are in the front, and there's two.
Okay. And then, so you said you served on that SEAL delivery vehicle team for 4 years. Where'd you go from there?
From there, I went to a graduate school.
At MIT, yeah. Okay.
MIT, and I studied underwater vehicle navigation, which was perfect for me because that's what I just spent 4 years doing, as being a navigator of one of these mini subs. And then finished up the school, and then moved out to California, where I was at SEAL Team 3.
Okay, so you say you studied underwater vehicle navigation. Who else was in that class? Was it all Navy SEALs? You can't just have my wife sitting next to you taking that class. I don't think she would be taking that.
No. There's actually outside of military aspects, there's a lot of companies that use underwater vehicles, oil groups, inspections and searching, so there's different types of underwater vehicles. You can have ones with people in it or unmanned, and those come in small and big and little packages. Some have a tether on them where the guy and a joystick and a camera looking for the Titanic kind of thing, but other ones are like kind of torpedo looking things that maybe will do a lawnmower pattern searching for something. So there's all kinds of different things, and getting the navigation right, they've got pretty good handle on it now, but 15 years ago they were tweaking those algorithms, I guess the best way to say, to really fine tune, making sure the vehicle never get lost.
Okay, yeah, now they probably just give you a little waterproof case for your iPhone. You just type it in. That's what I could imagine.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably just a more complicated version of that.
There's an app for it. You type in Titanic, and it just takes you to it.
It takes you right there. That's what you guys are doing, man. That's awesome. Good for you. So that takes you up to, like, say that. So you were. I had the honor of speaking with Jason Redmond, another a SEAL that was wounded pretty badly, but he was a SEAL pre and post 9/11. So this is pretty cool that I get to talk to another guy that was a SEAL pre and post. What's your take on how different it was being in the military before and after those planes hit? Yeah,
that's a good question, because like particularly in the SEAL teams, there wasn't. A SEAL platoon goes through about a year and a half of training together, and then goes overseas on a 6-month deployment to be ready for some contingency. Before September 11th, you never knew if your 6-month deployment was going to involve any exciting action, or if you were just going to go hang out and wait with your gear ready to go and never be called in the whole 6 months. But after September 11th happened, every single SEAL platoon, and military-wide really, but since we're talking about my experience in the SEAL teams, every SEAL platoon knew that they were going to war, and that really, really, right or wrong, it ups your intensity level on your training, and it's hard. I mean, as a football player, if you have a specific game and a specific situation that you're training to and preparing for as a team, it's a lot easier to hone in on exactly what you got to do. But if it's just play good football, how do you know where to hone in on? And that's before September 11th. It was, hey, go be a good SEAL platoon. The scope of missions is this big. It could be underwater, it could be from land, it could be from the air, it could be a combination of all these things. So it was a lot harder. The only downside after September 11th is we've sort of lost our command of doing missions from the water, because there's not a whole lot of seaborne missions going on in Iraq and Afghanistan. So, and our heritage, our SEAL team heritage, is coming out of the water to go do a mission. So I think talking to some of my buddies, that's where we're really now pulling back and say, okay, let's get our training back to where we need to be and be the world's leader in waterborne missions.
So you're speaking of, hadn't you spent some time boarding like oil rigs out in the middle of the ocean, stuff like that? Isn't that a big thing that you guys used to do, I guess, a lot?
Yeah, we still train for it, but exactly, you're exactly right. When I was at SEAL Team 3, we did that all the time, and then right after. So while I was at SEAL Team 3, I was a platoon commander. A SEAL platoon is about 16, 18 guys, and I was the officer in charge of one of those platoons. And our regularly scheduled 6-month deployment was supposed to be at Thanksgiving time of 2001. And so we had this big final training exercise in August of 2001. And then guys were starting to take leave and vacation. Guys think about getting married or whatever before going on deployment. And then a month later, September 11th happened. So we just so happened by luck to be the very most combat-ready SEAL platoon on the West Coast at the time. So that was how we found ourselves really kind of the first SEAL platoon out the door after the planes crashed.
So where were you when the planes hit, and then after you saw them hit, did you know that you were going to be going right away?
Yeah, so I was in Coronado, California, which is obviously West Coast time, 3 hours later. So the planes hit around, 9 o'clock in the morning. So it was 6 in the morning for me. I remember I was taking a shower, getting ready to go to work, and my wife called me in, hey, come on, dry off, get out of the shower, come see this. And as soon as I saw, I think before the second plane had crashed, I was on my bike riding to work that day, pretty much knew, and she knew too. She'd been around the teams long enough to know what it meant that our platoon was essentially ready to deploy anyway. So our platoon packed up our stuff that first day, and we had all the gear ready to go on an aircraft the next day.
Wow. So you say your wife knew? Did she kind of look at you and you guys have like an unspoken thing, like she just kind of nod at you and say, "Uh-oh, I know what's happening now"?
Yeah. Well, I think right then at the moment that morning, we were both kind of caught up in the whole September 11th thing that we all experienced. And then I came home that night, and that's when we had the conversation that you're kind of talking about. Okay, well, you know what this means, right? Yeah. And I remember we put a map up, because back then we had a little bit of internet, and I knew I'd have some kind of internet connectivity, but I wouldn't know how often I'd get to call home or talk to her or send her an email or anything. So we put up a map of the world on our dining room wall with little push pins in different countries with different colors on them. And that was our code word. I would say, hey, I'm at blue, I'm at yellow, I'm at red. So we didn't violate any operational security or anything over the phone, but she knew kind of could keep up on where I was.
Jeez, and that's always a question I have. How do you guys, not you guys, but there's so many people that have, stuff is classified and where you're going and where you're at. How do they keep stuff classified? Because that's guys want to tell their wives, their girlfriends, their brothers, their buddies. They want to tell them like what they did a little bit. How do they hone you in? They just scare you to death?
It's a tough problem, especially now with Facebook and Twitter, and it's so easy just to type in, "Hey, I'm packing my bags for a trip today," and then 2 tweets later, off to Djibouti, or wherever the crazy location you're going. So it's definitely hard, and most groups, I know in the SEAL teams, they would bring the wives in early on and say, okay, even though you're not members of the military, you essentially know classified information, troop movement, and who, what, where, when, how many, that kind of stuff we don't really like to broadcast. And so just be real sensitive with it. And it's hard to know how much is too much. And certainly I would never, it's impossible to withhold information from your parents and your wife of, hey, I'm leaving in 2 weeks, so they're going to find out. It's just a matter of getting everybody kind of in the mindset of not putting on Facebook, hey, Chris is going to Kandahar, Afghanistan. He'll be there for 6 weeks, and he's in charge of 18 guys. That kind of stuff you don't put on there.
I can imagine. I'm sure. Has that been tough for you at times? Say you get back from a 6-month deployment and you saw a lot of action in the theater, as you guys call it, I guess. Is it tough to come back and not want to at least? I mean, I'm sure you can kind of tell your family, your wife, who you feel closest to a tiny little bit. Is it hard not to tell her a little bit more, especially if you saw a lot of action?
Yeah, you're right. You kind of want to share, and wives are pretty tuned in too, because when you're say you're deployed, but you're in your kind of main staging base where you have access to a computer and a phone, and whatever that husband and wife rhythm is for communication, like if an email every day, maybe a phone call every 3 days or something like this, and then all of a sudden there's nothing for a week. The wife does just then go, oh, he doesn't like me this week. They know that, okay. Well, some wives might say that.
Some girlfriends. I bet some of those girlfriends do.
Say that, but most of them just realize, okay, well, they're busy right now. And then as soon as that busy period ends, all the wives get called on the same evening. And then the wives can talk to each other, and they're like, I haven't heard from either. So they pretty much know how busy the guys are.
That's good to hear. That made me think, where you said say you're talking, email, and anything every day, and then say you go a week. And say in your instance, how long would it have to be without hearing anything? Would your wife have to go before she called someone in the Navy or called someone trying to get answers for where you are? Because I can imagine if she hadn't heard from you 10, 14 days, she's probably thinking, thinking the worst.
Yeah. Well, it'd be like if you told your wife, hey, I got a 14-day road trip, and then you go away, and then Brett Favre's wife goes, no, what do you mean? They don't got any away games. You're totally busted.
Yeah.
No, but
that happens in the NFL more than you would know. Trust me. I've seen it happen with some guys.
No, but in all seriousness, I think generally, if a wife was expecting, hey, it's been a couple days since I talked to Chris, and I would say maybe 2 days, 3 days, they would call another wife, not any high-ranking person, but just call one of their pal wives and go, hey, you heard from the guys? Nope, I haven't either. Okay, roger that. And that'd probably be about it.
I'm sure they step into they figure it out real quickly, especially with you guys that have been in it. Like you said, you were a 10-year SEAL, so they know that you're going to the most dangerous spots, I guess. So that's just something they sign up for, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, some unknowingly sign up for it, but yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm sure you got some tough wives, man, to handle that. I don't know how. My wife gets scared of me playing football that I'm going to get hurt. That's all she cares about is me getting hurt. I was like, trust me, that's not the end of the world if I break an arm or something stupid, happens. Could be in a situation like you guys. I should have her whenever NFL wives start to get worried or any athlete wives, we should send them to speak to military wives, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, every job has its risk, you know. I mean, everything's relative, but you're right. It can always be worse. I mean, look at Jason. He had a rough go of it. I mean, he's doing great now, but I'm sure it was touch and go for him and his family for a while.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you guys are you guys aren't even human. The stuff you guys do. So now, obviously, I spent a lot of time talking about your SEAL days. I'm like a Navy SEAL nerd. I've read all kind of books when I was growing up, back when I probably middle school, high school, whatever. But I want to try to move on and just have
Real quick before you move on, I think we have a mutual friend.
Who?
Don't you have a buddy, Ron?
Ron Bellin.
Yeah, he was at SEAL Team 3, I think, when I was there.
Yeah, Ron just got out. 25 years. He just got out.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we were at Team 3 together. My memory's getting weaker as I'm getting older, but yeah.
Yeah, Ron is a big old dude. Ron was he carried the weapons. I know that. He was so big.
He's a big dude. I'm sure he was. We call him 60 gunners. You know, M60. It's always the biggest, strongest dude is the 60 gunner, and I'm sure he was a lifetime 60 gunner.
Oh, he had to be. When I first met Ron, he's friends with my buddy Doug, and they film a hunting / survival show right now for TV. And I first met Ron, and I was like, "Are you kidding me? This dude he's a 25-year SEAL. He's like 6'4", 250, just monster of a man,
Yeah.
and with a fake eye, by the way." And I found out his fake eye. I was thinking he got it. He got shot in the face or something, but no, he was actually unlucky and had cancer in his eye, and so he has one fake eye right now. Wears a patch most of the time.
How long has that been?
I think about 3 years probably he's had it.
Okay. Yeah, because I don't remember him with that. So yeah, it must be, yeah.
I think they took him off. I don't think they let him go out on combat missions after he lost his eye. That seems like something that would pull you out of action pretty quickly. I know he stayed in, but I think he had more of a training. Well, who knows? Whatever.
Training, probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But he. Yeah, so I've gotten lucky enough to meet a decent amount of SEALs, and that's why I just ask questions like I'm a little first grader, asking my dad why the sky is blue. It's everything you do is interesting.
Have you ever been to Coronado or Little Creek, Virginia, and toured around?
I never have. I have never been out there to either place, actually.
All right, dude. Let's take care of that. You get a tour here at the Space Center, and I'll help you there, and then I'll help put you in the right people to probably Coronado makes the most sense because then you can see where Buds is, and the SEAL teams and the Buds compound are right next to each other, so you get it over there.
I'm there. That'd be amazing. Yeah. I'm scared of all you guys. All you guys are crazy, man.
But it's probably mutual. If they hear that AJ Hawk's coming in, they'll part.
Don't have me run. Don't have me run a distance. I can swim average. I'm an average swimmer. Distance running, I'd be dead after about a half mile. I can only run about 40 yards, 50 yards. You
would actually really like the O course, the obstacle course out there in Coronado. Well, Little Creek has one too, but it is like a 10-minute, just really kick your butt kind of thing. You would like it.
That's from what I've seen. It looks fun. It looks, fun and very difficult at the same time, but. Hey, I'll take you up on that sometime. Believe me, I'd love to see all that stuff. It's all crazy fascinating to me.
A few of the obstacles are kind of technique driven where you need to have practice them a little bit, but most of them you can just knock it out and do it. So anyways.
I'll give it a shot. So then, right there, we could end it right there. We could easily end the old HawkCast right now with the crazy life you already live, but so then you just decided to go into a little occupation called being a NASA astronaut. Can you tell us? So you say you applied to be considered to become an astronaut. How's that work?
Yeah. So every handful of years, it's not a set time, but it's been about every 4 or 5 years recently. We'll have NASA will look for a new class of astronauts. And if you're in the military, you send your application through your military service. If you're civilian, you send it directly to the Johnson Space Center here. And then in Houston, they get this big pile of applications, and they sort through all of those and figure out who are the competitive people they want to bring down for an interview. And you come to Houston and have a week-long interview. It's kind of sometimes now broken up into two chunks, but essentially You're here for about a week, and you go through a battery of medical tests, a whole bunch of medical tests, and then some aptitude kind of testing where some robotics things on the computer, some mechanical aptitude, if you will, assembling things, putting stuff together in a sort of simulated spacewalk environment, and then a regular course interview with a panel and things like this. And then they rank everybody and figure out who they want to bring here. And for me, there was my class, I don't know how many, maybe 4,000 people applied. Then they made a cut down to about 120. And when I got to the 120 cut, I thought, wow, man, this is awesome. This is good. Every one of these people is a rock star, you know. So it's a roll of the dice if I get picked from here on. And then I actually made it. Which, and the funny thing was, I was deployed to Afghanistan after I did my interview. So I interviewed for here in September, and a week later I left for deployment with the Navy. The whole time NASA was considering other people. And this little old lady who was a neighbor in Virginia came over and knocked on my wife. My wife was outside, and the neighbor came over and said, "Some guys from the FBI were asking about your husband the other day." and she figured out that was a background check, and that was a good thing. We had kind of gotten the gouge that was a good thing, and so that was the first clue that I had that I was actually in the hunt for one of the spots.
So how many from that 120 made it and became an astronaut?
11.
Have all 11 of them been in space, or 10 others other than you?
Yeah, we've all been in space. We were fortunate to get here right at the tail end of the space shuttle program. So all 11 of us, we had 3 Japanese too. So 14 were training, but 11 Americans that were selected in that process. And every one of us got a seat on the space shuttle. And then about half of us have also flown to the space station, launching on a Russian Soyuz rocket, that was an interesting process too. My gosh.
Yeah, I want to get to that, but so your first space flight though was it on the shuttle?
It was. Yep, STS-127 on the Space Shuttle Endeavour, which is now parked out in Los Angeles, I think, in a museum.
So that's done, right?
Yeah.
That one's done? The Endeavour, is it done for good?
Yep, all of our space shuttles are retired, and they're off parked in museums. So we, as the United States, don't have a way to get our own Americans to space with an American rocket. We will soon, but right now we don't.
What is it? Aren't they building the Orion? Is that what it is?
Yep, exactly. Building Orion, and that's chugging along pretty nicely. This year they're having an actual test flight, unmanned, but the major milestone to putting people in it happens this year, probably with people in 2017, I think. And then SpaceX is a commercial company that is looking to put people in their rocket, along with Sierra Nevada and a couple other ones.
Is that Richard Branson? Is that SpaceX?
Richard Branson actually does Virgin Galactic, and that's a little bit different. You can do, it's called suborbital or orbital. You can launch and go around the planet, like the International Space Station, or Virgin, what they do is suborbital. They'll launch, get about 20 minutes of zero gravity, and then land right back in the same location without going around the Earth.
Oh, okay. So people that have big time money can go up and float around in space for 20 minutes and say they've been there?
Exactly. I think it's like $250,000 for that 20 minutes. So
is that going to happen, you think? I mean, is it going to actually go?
Yeah, it'll happen. No problem. I think they're just working things out with the last little bit of their technical stuff and figuring out, the business plan with the FAA, or I don't even know exactly but they're in the final stages of making it real.
That's a lot. You got a lot of disposable income if you're just going to go to space for 20 minutes just to say you've done it, I guess.
Yeah.
Your first trip to space, I know, was well shorter than your second time. Your first one, how many days?
About 2 weeks, 16 days. So you're right, much shorter than 6 months.
And did you not go to the space station that time?
No, we did. The space shuttle, it's actually interesting. The space shuttle is limited to that time based on the amount of oxygen that it can carry up with it. So we would go to the space station, basically be part of the construction of the space station. You can think of the space shuttle like a big pickup truck. So we'd fill it full of cargo. In our case, it was a new portion of the Japanese side of the space station. We put this external platform on the outside of the space station near the Japanese module. And so we installed that and had to do some spacewalks to get it ready to go. And we also, there's, when you're going around, you can see the space station behind me. Those orange things on the side that look like the Star Wars vehicle there, those are the solar arrays. And you're going around the world every 90 minutes. So 45 minutes of that time, you're charging the batteries with the solar arrays. And then you go into the dark side of the orbit, and you're using the electricity out of the batteries. So every 45 minutes, you're charging and discharging these big, giant batteries. So we had to replace some of those batteries on a couple of our spacewalks. So yeah, really very fast-paced 2 weeks, a lot of construction, basically, and then returned back down to Florida.
And how many spacewalks did you do on those 2 weeks?
I personally did 3. As a crew, we did 5, but I was involved outside on 3 of them.
And what was, obviously, launching into space had to be a crazy ride. Can you tell us how, kind of explain to, I guess, how the best you can for us people that don't know anything about space and don't know what it's like, from the launch to when you got into orbit, and then we'll move on to the spacewalk next. I think this is, I don't want to make that a 2-part question. I'm sorry. So just can you explain a little bit about how, when you guys when they fired up those engines and you took off, what was that like?
Well, first I got to tell you, on the shuttle, you never really knew if you were going to really launch or not.
Oh, wasn't it your 6th attempt?
Yeah, exactly. And I tell kids in school, imagine you go to bed and your parents tell you, tomorrow morning is Christmas morning. And then you wake up and they're like, nah, it's not today. Christmas is tomorrow, trust me. And then tomorrow you wake up, same thing, and again, and again, and again. And finally on the 6th day when you wake up, you really don't believe it's going to be Christmas today. And that's how I kind of felt. Like, by the time we actually got in that vehicle, I was watching the clock tick down thinking, what a bunch of crap. And actually, it was still gray. It was gray outside when if you ever seen pictures of the crew in the orange suit, and we walk out of this building, and then we get onto this bus and drive out to the launch pad. When we walked out of the building and got onto the bus, I looked up at the sky, and there's just like a wall of gray over Cocoa Beach, and I thought, another wasted day, here we go. And then we got in, and lo and behold, we launched. So anyways, on launch day, typically when you go to the launch pad, there's like forklifts and people and hard hats and guys and trucks and like all this activity. But on launch day, there's nobody. In fact, everybody else is driving away, and you're the only vehicle going to the pad. And you get there, and there's like steam coming out of the tanks, and you can just feel the energy trapped up in that thing. And you look up and go, holy cow, I'm going to actually strap into that thing. Go up in this elevator, and you walk across a gangplank, and you put the final parts of your suit on and then crawl into the vehicle and strap in. And you're in there for about 2.5 to 3 hours on your back waiting to go. And then with the shuttle, anyways, the final go, no go for launch happened at T-minus 9 minutes. So once we finally got the go for launch at 9 minutes, then you know it's game on. And what's kind of interesting for most people, you know, never really get to be inside of a cockpit of a shuttle on launch day. And it's we had a bunch of movie buffs on our crew. Doug Hurley and Mark Polanski could quote any movie line in the history of mankind. So there never was just a normal discussion amongst our crew. It was always related to somehow a movie quote. And so it was just nonstop movie lines and humor for 2 hours. But I remember after 9 minutes and we got go for launch, there was not a single joke. It was all just serious, calm, exactly down the checklist, and straight up, like, it reminded me very much of getting on a helicopter to go into a mission in the SEAL teams. Just, hey, laser vision, maybe the same way when you're running out the tunnel for a big game or something. It's all, everything else is behind you, and it's like, let's go get this done kind of thing. And then as the clock ticked down, I remember just being so excited and just pumped. And and then the rocket lights, and you're kind of rumbling. And on the shuttle, the first 2 minutes of the 8.5 minute ride, the bulk of the thrust is coming. If you can picture, there's like two white solid rocket motors and then an orange fuel tank in the middle. Well, the bulk of the thrust comes from those solid rocket motors in the first 2 minutes, and they're really bumpy. And if I tried to write something on my kneeboard, I couldn't read my handwriting. It's just very, very bumpy. And then those things get used up and fall away, and then it becomes almost eerily smooth and quiet. So much so that I was looking around like, okay, is everybody cool with this plan? All right, everybody's cool. So it must be normal, because it almost didn't feel like we were on a rocket anymore. And then finally, you get going, and the G-forces build up, and the vector of the G is into your chest, so it's kind of like pushing you back into your chair. Your skin is going back like that, and it's hard to lift your arms up. And then eventually, right at main engine cutoff, you go from that G's to just kind of it feels like you're tumbling, but you're all strapped in your seat. So that's the first sensation of zero G, is this of your mind telling you that you're flipping head over heels, but your eyeballs telling you, I'm stuck to my seat, I'm not moving, everything's good. It's kind of weird.
And so then when you hit that zero G, like you say, and you realize it, how long till you get out of your straps and go float around and start taking care of your job?
It depends on what your job is. For me, it was immediately, because my primary job was to take pictures so right after the main engine cutoff, the shuttle separated from the external fuel tank. And then we would flip upside down so that we could take pictures through a window at this external fuel tank. And that was critically important, because I don't know if you ever heard that foam was coming off of the external fuel tank insulation, and it would hit the shuttle in certain areas and could impact and damage the tile that was needed to keep us alive for reentry.
The heat shield?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the first step in that process of keeping us safe was to take really detailed photos of the external fuel tank right after we separated to see if there was any chunks of foam missing. So my first job was, as soon as engines cut off, unstrap, helmet off, get a camera, and take pictures of this tank and a video of the tank. So on literally 10 seconds after the engines cut off, I was out of my seat and kind of trying to manage all this stuff. And you take your helmet, it's floating, your gloves are floating around. It's really kind of crazy. It's a little bit of a practice thing to get used to how to manage stuff in zero gravity, because stuff doesn't behave like you're used to it behaving.
I mean, now you said the shuttle flipped upside down, is that just all a part of, that's like an autopilot? The shuttle's doing that regardless? It's from the ground? They schedule that, or what?
No, actually, Mark, our commander, as soon as the engine's cut out, everything's with a procedure, and we had trained it over and over, but he has to input a certain number of impulse with the engine. And basically, he commanded the shuttle to flip around and pitch over upside down 180 degrees, and then stop that rotation. And when myself and Dave, the other guy who was taking photos, we said, okay, the tank's in the window, he would stop, and then he would just kind of match the rotation so we could get good pictures the whole time.
That's a heck of a job as a pilot, coming through all that adversity with all the monster G's, however many it is, hitting you in the chest, and then boom, instant zero G's, and you're controlling this shuttle. I can imagine you guys practiced that a few times.
We did. We practiced it over and over and over again. So in fact, the real day was easier than the training, because the training, they always put in malfunctions and the trainers think of these crazy scenarios that you have to react to. In the real day, everything worked. So it was, to some degree, it was easier, minus the feeling like you're going to throw up all over yourself.
And then how long was it before you took your first spacewalk?
For me, it was about a week, because, like I said, we did 5 as a crew, and I did the 3rd, 4th, and 5th one. So we'd rendezvous to the space station on the 3rd day, and then another probably 5 days to do those first two. So yeah, it was about a week later that I had my spacewalks, and then it was every other day. I did three spacewalks in the next 6 days.
Is that a similar thing as you had like when you were driving the mini sub out of the sub in the ocean, where they had to get outside of the shuttle? I mean, did you have to get into a chamber and I imagine obviously air seal you and then lock the doors behind you and let you out again?
Yeah, exact same concept as doing it in the water. It's the same thing we do up there on the space station, except instead of taking water on board a submarine, we're venting the air outside of our airlock to equalize to the vacuum of space, and then open the hatch and go. It's funny. There's a funny story about my very first spacewalk. I was the guy cranking the hatch handle open, and there's always just a little bit of extra pressure inside the airlock until you pull the hatch up off the seal. If you can picture that, you suck it up off. And there happened to be a piece of trash that had gotten out of the trash can. Somehow was in the airlock, and it was right by my head, and I didn't see it. And I popped open the hatch, and this piece of trash, it was a straw from a drink, went flying past my head and zipping down, spiraling down to the earth. And I remember looking at that going, I don't want to be that straw. Hold on tight. And so that was my very, very first thing. And then you realize everything's going to be okay. You're not going to fall, even though it's kind of like if you go to a very tall skyscraper and you're in the top floor, but you're still inside the glass wall, you can look over put your head up against the glass and look down, and you go, wow, that's far. But you feel safe because you got the handrail there, and you know that there's a glass wall and everything. But then if you go one floor higher to the top of the skyscraper, and there's no handrail, there's no glass, and you put your toes over the edge, and you go, the brain tells you to back off because you don't want to fall. That's what it kind of felt like to me on the first spacewalk. Of holy crap, don't let go, and then you realize that you're not gonna fall.
And so you got to be. Are you tethered to the shuttle somehow, or the space station, I should say?
Yeah, exactly. We have these things called safety tethers, which are kind of like a retractable dog leash, and we'll hook them to the airlock and then go out. And if you fall, it would slowly pull you back in theory, but and very often you have to go farther than the length of that dog leash, so we have to use several of them. It takes about 4 lengths of the longest tether we have to get from the airlock all the way out to the farthest point of the space station.
Still, I would imagine it's got to. I mean, you're still floating out in space outside of the shuttle, so I'd imagine there's still some. The first time, at least, there's got to be some anxiety there.
Oh yeah, and plus, everything is new and shiny. We train for this in a pool, and in the pool you're using plastic things, and the metal is kind of corroded and sometimes rusty. And they do their best to make it as high fidelity as they can. But when you go on a real spacewalk, the box is like shiny brand new, and the serial number is 001, and you realize that a lot of people have put a lot of work into making that box and then to getting it to space, and you're the guy that everybody is watching to install it, so don't screw it up kind of thing.
That's got to be a lot of pressure. Yeah, don't mess this up, man. We've been working with some company, whoever, that's their whole life is that little box probably.
Exactly. And then the other interesting twist is everything we say in the microphone goes directly to NASA TV. So can you imagine if you were wearing a live microphone all game, every game? Maybe you have sometimes, but at least they edit it.
They're not live, yeah. They have to edit it.
They're not live.
Yeah, they edit a lot.
And so you really got to pay attention to what you say and how you say it, the tone of your voice. All that is as much a part of our training as the actual hands-on, because you can cause the ground or the engineers to kind of scurry off into one path of troubleshooting just by poor reporting or improper comm and things like this. So there's a whole lot of aspects to spacewalks training.
And I saw I was looking some stuff up on your spacewalks, and I saw a picture. I think they said it was 1984. I don't know if you know about it, when the guy did the last untethered spacewalk. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I do. the good thing about that is the shuttle was right there. So the shuttle, if the thing malfunctioned, the shuttle could go get him. But still, that would be you gotta have your big boy pants on to do a spacewalk walk like that.
Yeah, that picture. There's a picture of it for anyone that probably hasn't seen it, and it's like it looks like a movie. It looks like the movie Gravity, basically. Did you see Gravity?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like that, and it sounds like he had. It was like they said it was like the future. It was like a little joystick that he had that would just propel him, wouldn't it? Shoot a little whatever thrusters out.
Yep, exactly. Not a whole lot of gas in there too, so you got to manage it. I'm sure. I don't know the specifics of it, but I'm sure they had a gauge telling how much more fuel he had and that sort of thing.
That'd be yeah. The picture alone gave me anxiety. It's like being scared of heights times a billion. I think being out there at all, even tethered, being out there, it would. But so I would like to know a little bit the contrast. So that was 2009. You're up there 16 days, and then you went up there on what, the Russian Soyuz? Is that what you call it?
Yeah, exactly.
For what, 6 months? Were you in space?
6 months. Yep.
How were those? I'm sure they were. How could you describe how different those experiences were between going on the shuttle and going on with the Russians, and what you fly out of? Where'd you fly out of? Where'd you guys take off?
Baikonur, Kazakhstan, middle of nowhere, basically. There's two ways I want to talk about. One is the difference between shuttle and Soyuz, and one is the difference between a short 2 weeks and 6 months. That one first. If you rent a vacation home with your family, for instance, you go to that home and you use the facilities, you use the pool and the beach or wherever you're located, but you don't really care about the maintenance of the hot water heater or the maintenance of the sprinkler system or how do you connect the video cables on the audio visual equipment. You just use all the stuff and then you go home to your real house. But in your real home, you pay attention to the hot water heaters and you know where all the stuff's organized in the garage and you know the nuances of that particular outlet in the kids' room, that kind of thing. And that's how I felt on the space station when I was there just briefly with the shuttle. Even though I was on the space station, it was only 2 weeks, and my home was the shuttle. My clothes, my toilet, my sleeping bag was all in the shuttle. And every time I'd float over to the space station, I felt like I was a visitor. But this time, living there for 6 months, it was my home. I knew every inch of that place. I felt like I could hear the different tones in the fans or the hums of different machinery noises, and I could tell if something was wrong or not. So it was this really, really cool feeling of like, hey, I got it. This is I understand this space station and I'm one with it. So that was kind of the difference there. That was pretty cool. And then shuttle Soyuz differences, that's really about the size of it. The shuttle you can think of like a big pickup truck, like I was saying earlier. And if you take a pickup truck and go like this, driving down the road, it kind of sloppily responds to you a little bit. But if you do that with a little sports car, zippy little sports car that's low to the ground, you can imagine every little movement of that steering wheel, you're feeling it. And that's how I felt in the Soyuz, because it's so much smaller by mass than the shuttle. I remember feeling every little turn as we're coming up the launch pad and the vehicle's turning to get on heading, it almost snapped over. Whereas the shuttle, it just felt like this big rumbling thing as it rolled around, and just because it was so much bigger and so much more massive than the Soyuz. And the other thing was the comfort of the seats. The shuttle is like sitting in a man cave with your remote control, your kick back, your feet are comfortable. And the Soyuz, you're sitting like all scrunched up tight in there and not very comfortable. So anyways, just differences.
So that's a good thing then. Wasn't it in the Soyuz that weren't you guys like the first ones to take the expedited path to the space station? Like, was it 2 days? You were like 6 hours compared to 2 days or something?
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't because our crew was so awesome or anything. We just happened to be the guys that were there when they decided to do it. But yeah, 6 hours after launch is when we got to the space station, which is really, really nice. Because if you have to say you had to live in a Mini Cooper for 3 days, at some point you got to do number 2.
Yeah, there's
right?
no bathroom there, is there?
There is a bathroom, but your buddy's sitting right next to you as you're doing it. So it's really kind of nice to get there in 6 hours and not have to do those kind of things.
Yeah, I can imagine. Your buddies might be upset with you. I'd tell you, you guys would all be fasting for the week before the flight. Just let them know.
And doing other things the morning of.
Yeah, exactly. So how does you're the first people to take that, that shorter path. How, to us laymen, to us idiots, how do you explain that to us? Why didn't everybody take that 6-hour track?
Yeah, there's probably a lot of different reasons. I think it takes a little bit less fuel to do it the slower way. And also, it's kind of nice to have a day built in to respond to any failures. You have a little more leeway in there were called burn. There are things called, after you launch, you don't immediately just coast to the space station. You have to do these maneuvers called burns. We call them burns. That's space lingo for a little burst of the engine that kind of slowly stair steps you up to the space station altitude and brings you in for rendezvous. And these burns get tighter and tighter, and the tolerances get tighter and tighter and tighter as you get closer. But on a 6-hour rendezvous, there's not a whole lot of margin for error in those, and the space station has to be more tightly held in its position. So all the tolerances basically are tighter, which set you up for something not going right. You know what I mean? Whereas if you're planning on 3 days, you can have a little slop in each burn and you'll recover no problem.
You can be a little bit off heading and correct it on the next one probably?
Exactly. Whereas on a 6-hour one, you pretty much got to be balls on every one.
Yeah, I think when you say burn, it reminds me of the old, I'm sure. How sick are you of hearing people talk about, or probably ask you about Apollo 13 or Armageddon? Is that some of the first questions you get?
No, the first question I get is, how do you go to the bathroom in space?
Of course, yeah.
But no, whatever. I don't mind people's questions. It's interesting to me about what they're curious about and stuff. So yeah, but yeah, it reminds you of those kind of things where things can go wrong like that, right?
Yeah, when you were describing what it was like to take the elevator up, and then you walk the little gangway. All I was thinking of was Ben Affleck and Bruce Willis walking. You know how they're two teams. They walk up and they get on their shuttle to go up and drill into the asteroid or whatever and save the world. Basically, that's what I was envisioning the whole time. You guys in your orange suits. So you got when you're up there for 6 months, you got some nice national publicity. I guess you are officially probably the guy that started the whole selfie craze, aren't you? You took a selfie picture of yourself while you're on a spacewalk, didn't you?
Lots of people do that, and I had no idea that this was like the big selfie year. And then
because of you started it.
Yeah, well, I was in space that I was part of the selfie pictures of the year or something like this. So it kind of surprised me.
Yeah, you're the reason now that people don't take normal pictures. We got to squeeze in with our head, like my grandma or my family. They won't just sit there and take a picture to have someone take it for them. You got to sit there and put us in there together because you took such a beautiful picture of yourself outside the spacecraft. And how did you you did what, the top 10 plays on SportsCenter? How did that come about? From space, I mean.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting. While we're up there, the mission support people asked us what kind of TV shows we want to have recorded and sent up, and I said, hey, all I want to watch is sports wrap up and maybe SportsCenter kind of thing. And so NASA and ESPN were figuring out how to make that process happen without a person having to record it and do a bunch of work every single day. And through their efforts. Yeah, we kind of got linked up with ESPN, and I just made a couple intro videos for it, and then after the mission, got to go to Bristol, Connecticut, and tour around. So that was pretty cool.
That has to be just to think of the technology that you guys have now. Is it true when they say the spacecraft that went to the moon had like don't they say that our iPhone is like 100 times more powerful than the technology they had aboard that?
Yeah, I don't know the exact ratio of the computer RAM and stuff like that, but you're right. What we carry around in our pocket is to a large degree more powerful than what they were going to the moon on.
Gosh, you talk about some ballsy guys. That'd be a scary mission. I can't imagine that one. Whew. First guys to walk on the moon. Do you get people that come up to you, like conspiracy theorists, and say we didn't walk on the moon?
Oh yeah, there's people that say that. Where's the building that they staged it out of and things like this? But no, it's real.
Hey, I believe it. And I'm going to start to wrap it up here. You've already been generous enough with your time. You're a busy man. I'm sure you got rockets to build and think about going to probably. You guys are probably drawing up plans on when you're going to Mars on the Orion and all kind of stuff. So, but I got to ask you a little bit about. So say you go up there, you've been on what, 5 spacewalks? Is that right?
6.
6 spacewalks. What, 100 and some days in space? What, 150, 160?
Yeah, just basically 6 months or so, a little bit. Yeah, 160 to 70. I forget exactly, but
okay, yeah. And then how many hours of outside of the how many hours of spacewalks have you had? Do you know?
30 something, 32 or 3 or 4, somewhere in there.
Okay, so you've had all this time, 6 months in space in a shuttle, 30 some hours outside the shuttle. What are your thoughts? Did it change anything of your thoughts on potential something out there? It's so big. I feel like our heads, my head at least, if I start to have a smart person like yourself try to even describe the universe to me, it breaks my brain because it's so big, you know? Just our tiny little Milky Way galaxy. And then they say, oh, hey, guess what? There's billions and billions. So get up, did that change anything of your views of what you had going in?
Isn't it? I'm the same way as you, trying to understand just how big that really is and how small of a speck we are in space and in time, really. Oh. What to you and me is a lifetime ago when we were kids, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. But that is like a tiniest morsel of time. And that is just really hard to conceptualize, at least for me. I'm exactly the way you described. But to get to your question, I don't believe there's any aliens in our immediate area, but I also think that it would be kind of naive or narrow-minded of us to think that in the vastness of the universe there does not exist some evidence of life. I mean, that's unrealistic, I think. Whether it looks like us or an alien from Nevada, that part I'm not so sold on, but some sort of living organism, I'm sure, is out there in the farthest away reaches that maybe we can't even comprehend how far away.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Honestly, last night, I don't know if you watch at all the show Cosmos with Neil deGrasse Tyson. Have you ever heard of it?
I have, yeah.
Okay, so they do a really good job of like illustrating and dumbing it down for us. And by us, I mean me. No, I'm not putting you in that category. You've been up there cruising around, man. By us, I mean us idiots that over here in Ohio, not you guys. But I was watching it, and it hit me. I knew I was going to be talking to you today, and I was like, I got to ask him something. He's been outside the shuttle. Not only has he been in space, he's been cruising around outside in the suit. I was like, I wonder if that. So I know what you said there that something could definitely be out there, some organism did it, but did you realize how small we were? Like, I know you already referenced it, but did it change any way of how you look at life when you got back to space or got back to Earth after you're up there thinking of, geez, now I've heard about it. I know how vast space is, but now I've seen it with my own eyes. Did that change you or make you, I don't want to, not take anything for granted or enjoy every moment, anything like that?
For me, it was more about the Earth itself. I've never been a real big tree hugger or this kind of person growing up or anything. But when I saw the Earth from that vantage point looking down and this tiny, skinny little layer of an atmosphere that keeps us essentially alive, realizing that, wow, that blue thing is the spaceship for 7 billion people. It's a spaceship for all of us, and we collectively, mankind, have to take care of it so it can do its job and keep us alive. And so it kind of made me more appreciate what Earth does for us, what it does to keep us alive, and how we can do well by Earth itself. You know what I mean? That type of thing is what really kind of my time in space has made me realize. Appreciation for Earth, I guess, sums it up more succinctly.
I got you. Yeah, it makes sense for sure. You've got to ultimately you've taken the ultimate like step back. When people always say if you could step back and take yourself out of the equation or kind of look at it from a broad spectrum, and you have done that the only way you can. You know, and there's only whatever. And you were what, the 500th person in space? Is that correct?
Yep. You
just hit. I mean, what? I'm telling you, I'm gonna write you up a little basic resume, and we're just gonna send it around. You want to be governor first?
Yeah, I'll be governor.
Governor, and then okay. So, whenever I'm gonna save this, we're gonna save this video because it's gonna be awesome that I talked to a future president. So when you're the president of the United States, I'm just gonna keep this video for my kids. I'll just show it to them. Don't worry. No, it's amazing what you've done at 44 already in your life, but I could ask you questions for 100 years, but I want to thank you very much for coming on here. It was absolute honor for me, and just, man, what an awesome story I think you have, and we didn't even get to scratch the surface of it because you're doing so much. But if you is there any thoughts you want to leave us with, or let us know your future plans, and like how long are you still with NASA? Do you guys sign contracts, or how's that work?
So my paycheck still comes from the Navy, so I'm an active duty Navy guy, and I'm working here at NASA. Essentially, it's kind of my decision, really, and I'm working now in a more ground support role in the Spacewalk department or division, if you will, for lack of a better word, here at the Space Center. So that's my sort of 9-to-5 type job now here in Houston. And if, like I said earlier, when you get time, please don't hesitate to let me know you're going to be here. Or I don't even know, maybe Green Bay's playing Houston this year in Houston, but I know that during the season it's probably pretty hard to get time off this, even when you're on an away game. But
hey, Saturday we
you're
fly in.
Welcome here all the time.
Hey, I appreciate it. Yeah, we fly in on Saturday if it's not too far from our team hotel. They give us 3 or 4 hours to walk around the mall or whatever. So I figured I could slide on over and walk around and check out the shuttle and check out what you guys are doing.
Yeah, we'll make that happen. No problem.
All right. Well, Chris Cassidy, I want to thank you again. Really appreciate it. Really, like I said, really an honor. I'm really curious about the life you have lived so far. It's such a young buck, only 44 years old, only a few years older than myself.
I didn't get a chance to ask you any questions about your life of football and all that. So we'll save that for a beer.
That's right, man. Whenever you want it, I'm available. But I'm sorry, I will start bugging you, and I'll just turn it. I'll stop answering questions about myself, and I'll answer. Yeah, football's great. But what about what about the aliens again? I would just turn it back on NASA. I'm sorry.
Hey, good luck. Good luck next season, AJ.
I really appreciate it. Thank you very much, man. We're looking forward to it. So I will talk to you later, Chris. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for joining in. Please visit thehawkcast.com, where you can discover the next guest, get a little more information about why this exists, watch past episodes, or link over to iTunes. And tell some friends too, so we can all hear more great stories together.